So I begin with a question to you, just for you. You don't have to say it aloud. Please imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 at the bottom to 10 at the top. The top of the ladder represents the best possible life for you, and the bottom of the ladder represents the worst possible life for you. On which step of the ladder would you say you personally stand at this time? Next. So if you ask yourself this question, you are thinking not just about how you feel right now, but really about your life more generally. You are applying a cognitive approach to it. And this graph that looks like a U or a smile is a picture of answers of people in developed countries. That includes Switzerland, of course, and the United States. And what you see is that well-being, both men and women, declines from the 20s until the mid-50s and then begins to increase. I am beyond the 50s, and I can testify that that is true, at least in my case. Why does it happen? In all likelihood, what is happening is that in your early years, your aspirations are higher than your situation. You are starting work. Is that the right work for you? You are at the bottom of that ladder. You have a boss who is not always right. You're competing with others. You're establishing a family. There are stresses that have to do with that. Once you get to that mid-50s or so, you begin to move up. You kind of say, hey, I'm okay. I am not the CEO, but I am doing just fine. I have not acquired as many millions as I hoped, but I'm doing perfectly fine. Now, the point of this slide, beyond that U shape, is really to say that well-being is at the center of what you are doing. I think of you as well-being advisor rather than as a financial advisor. Next. So what we want to do, we people, you and I, clients, we want to maximize our well-being. And wealth is really important, but it really is just a way station to well-being. And the domains of well-being, of course, include finances, but they also include family and friends and community. This is sort of obvious, but we have to say that because we, as academics in finance and financial advisors, we have been trained to focus on just the finances. Health, both physical and mental, work and activities, values, religion, spirituality. And this is just a partial list. There is more to it. Education, for example, matters as well. Next. So I illustrated using examples from our time of COVID. I hope that it is behind us, but it is not forgotten yet. And I say that in every product and service, whether it is financial or general, a car, a watch, your services as financial advisors, my services as a teacher, there are three kinds of benefits and corresponding costs: utilitarian benefits, expressive benefits, and emotional benefits. Utilitarian benefits answer the question, what does it do for my pocketbook? Does it add money to it or not? And what will I do with that money, utilitarian benefits. I have food and shelter. This is a photo of people waiting in line for food during the time of COVID. Expressive benefits. What does it say about me? I am financially secure. If I have money, I do not need to stand in line for food. And there are emotional benefits. How does it make me feel? It makes me feel freedom from fear. Well, where will the next meal come from is not something that I fear. Next. Similarly, if you think about the domain of family, friends, and community, the utilitarian benefits are I support my family and community, and I'm supported by them. That is a good feeling, but it is just a plain utilitarian benefit. Expressive benefits in being a responsible parent and contributor to my community, and the emotional benefit of love. We love our spouse, we love our children. Next. Now think about health, physical and mental. I can perform all of life activities. I'm not dependent on caregivers. I am free of pain. You can see in every product or service, in every facet of life, those three kinds of benefits matter. Next. Work. Yes, we work to earn money, of course, but there's more to it. That is, you get up in the morning and you're ready to work, or you say, God, I'm waiting for the weekend. I contribute to my family and community. That feels good. And I enjoy a sense of accomplishment and camaraderie. I think that we've all been deprived of at least the camaraderie during the time of COVID, when we saw our co-workers mostly on Zoom. Next. And we care about our values and religion and spirituality. Here you can see a woman who is distributing food. She must be a volunteer. What is she getting in utilitarian benefits? Nothing. She's really paying utilitarian costs. She has to spend her time. She has to spend her money to get to that place. But in return, she gets a lot of expressive and emotional benefits. She says to herself and to others, I am a helpful person. And she knows that she is a compassionate person, and that gives us a lot of satisfaction. Next. You can see socially responsible investing, ESG as we call it now. That woman says, truth be told, I'm as financially ambitious as I'm socially conscious. She cares about the three benefits. She cares to get high returns, but she also presents herself and others as being socially responsible and having peace of mind because her finances are true to her values. Next. And we care about our values. We also care about our social status. We all care about our social status, whether you're an advisor who cares about, say, how much money do you have under management, whether you are a professor, as I am, caring about whether I am an assistant professor or associate professor or a full professor, and so on. So hedge funds, yes, they are about returns and risk, and supposedly they provide high returns with low risk. But you know, just you say I'm into hedge funds, and I know that you are not a poor man or woman, and you feel proud as a member of an exclusive club because there is a minimum in the high numbers that is required to enter into this club. Next. Now, I want to talk just briefly about differences in culture. So we are all people, and we are all wired the same way. Our brains are the same, but culture matters in addition to that wiring. Some years ago, I was speaking to a group of financial advisors, and one thing that I said is, it is better to give with a warm hand than a cold one. Now, when I was done, people surrounded me to ask questions, offer opinions. They talked about the need to save more and spend less. They talked about widows who spend a whole lot after their husbands die, and so on. One advisor stood aside, and when they were gone, she came to speak with me, and she said, I started crying when you said it's better to give with a warm hand than a cold one. She described giving her son some $23,000 for tuition for his studies, with an agreement that he'll pay back as soon as he graduates. But now he graduated, but he is squeezed. He's just at the beginning of his professional life as an adult. She said he doesn't even have money to give his girlfriend a diamond ring of engagement. And of course, it soured their relationship. And so it really made me think about how cultures differ. Next. So as my accent reveals, I'm from Israel originally, and here in this photo, you see me at 22 getting married to my bride, Nava, who was at 21. Neither of us looks the same. But the point I want to make is that before we were married, my parents drove up to meet Nava's parents at their home, and we all had dinner together. And after dinner, Nava and I were excused to go for a walk, and our parents said to do business. Business meant how much each pair of parents is going to give the young couple to start them on their new life for buying a house. That really is something that is very familiar to me as a former Israeli. It is familiar, I'm sure, to many Americans and many Swiss, but it is not a universal thing. Next. Here's another example of culture. In Switzerland, as you know better than me, rates of home ownership are really quite low relative to the US or a place like Spain, where 83% of people live in their own houses they own, whereas in Switzerland, the percentage is 44. Now, of course, utilitarian benefits and costs matter. Things like how much does it cost to rent versus buy, the effectiveness of rental markets, regulations, but it's also a matter of expressive and emotional benefits and costs, and they are part of culture. And one interesting study looked at what happened to second-generation immigrants to the United States from countries like Spain and Switzerland and so on. And it turns out that people carry their preferences from their home countries. Next. So I widen my lens now, and I'm going to talk about the structure of behavioral finance and the second generation. So we often hear that behavioral finance is nothing more than a collection of stories, that it lacks a rigorous structure of standard finance. And to that, I say that is nonsense. Next. Behavioral finance is as rigorous as standard finance, and it is closer to reality, much closer to reality than standard finance. And so in standard finance, people are described as rational. In behavioral finance, we describe them as normal. People like you, people like me, we have a behavioral portfolio theory in place of mean variance portfolio theory. We have a behavioral life cycle theory of saving and spending in place of the life cycle, standard life cycle theory. We have asset pricing theory that is different, complements the standard asset pricing theory. And we clarify notions of market efficiency that unfortunately got confused in standard finance, distinguishing price equal value notions of markets from hard to beat markets. And we explain why many people believe that markets are easy to beat. And I'll speak about each of them now. Next. So in rational, in normal, everyday language, we use the word rational in a way that I would describe as normal knowledgeable and normal smart. We might say it's not rational to buy a Lexus automobile when a Toyota is just as good, or it is not rational to charge a lot on your card when you have to pay high interest rates. But in finance, we use the notion of rationality more narrowly. And rational people in standard finance want only wealth, and they are immune to cognitive and emotional errors that diminish wealth. Now, in the first generation of behavioral finance, and I was part of it, we describe people as irrational. Yes, we want exactly what the people in standard finance want, just wealth, but we are susceptible to cognitive and emotional errors that diminish wealth. And in the second generation of behavioral finance that I'm speaking about it, we are describing people as normal, people like you and me, and we want more than wealth. Yes, we do commit cognitive and emotional errors, but we do that on the way to satisfying our wants. Next. So here's an illustration of the difference between standard finance, the first generation, and the second generation of behavioral finance. This photo is from my first trip to Switzerland a long time ago. And as I read it, there's an American, it says Toto, Loto, lose. I understand that in German, lose is pronounced differently, and it is just one more way for you to play the lottery. But to me, I thought that was funny because it really reveals what this is about. You're most likely to lose money as you buy lottery tickets. So why do people buy lottery tickets? Well, in standard finance, people don't buy lottery tickets because it's not rational. That is, the expected return of a lottery ticket is, of course, negative. But normal people buy lottery tickets. I bought lottery tickets. Perhaps you did. Why? Because lottery tickets have utilitarian benefits. I might be the winner. I might be really, really rich. But even if not, I am a player with a chance to be rich. I have expressive benefits. I'm in the game. And then there are emotional benefits. I savor hope of being rich. I can spend the entire week thinking about what to do with the 100 million or more that I'm going to win. Who am I going to give it to? What am I going to buy? And so on. So this is normal behavior. People who buy lottery tickets are not irrational. It is not that they don't know the odds of winning. They know that they are minuscule. Imagine me standing behind you and you're about to buy a lottery ticket and I say, you know, the odds of winning are not 1 in 100 million as you think, but 1 in 200 million. Well, of course, that is not going to deter you from buying a lottery ticket. You know that the odds are minuscule, but hope really, really matters. Next. So again, normal people like you and me, we are generally normal smart, but sometimes we are normal foolish. Normal people are generally normal knowledgeable, but sometimes we are normal ignorant. And the good news is normal people are intelligent, and we can increase the ratio of smart to foolish and knowledgeable to ignorant. Next. How do I verify that you are normal? Very easy. Do you have normal wants? Do you want to avoid poverty, prospects of riches, nurturing your children, being true to your value, having high social status? The answer to most of these is likely to be yes. Next. And do you use cognitive and emotional shortcuts? And sometimes they turn into cognitive and emotional errors. Framing, hindsight. Have you ever experienced fear? Have you ever experienced regret? I think that the answer to this is likely to be yes. Next. So I want to talk now about how to place that in the context of your work, your role. I think of you as financial physicians or well-being managers, well-being advisors. And the analogy to physicians, I think, is well placed because good physicians promote both health and well-being. That is, you expect your physician to be at the frontier of knowledge in medicine, just as your clients expect you to be at the frontier of knowledge of finance. But bedside manner matters in medicine, and bedside manner, or the equivalent of bedside manner, matters in the case of investments. I'll tell you a quick story about well-being in the context of medicine. Some years ago, I was on a long telephone call and I tired my arm and I switched the phone to the other arm and I placed my right arm on my left shoulder and I found a bump. So I kind of had my finger around it. It was a distinct bump. And so I called my physician and he told me to come in. I was afraid, of course, a bump, God knows, might be cancer. I said, no, not to worry, just some fat under the skin, but it's better to take it out so it does not expand. When I saw the surgeon, I said, my understanding is that it is just benign. And he did not look at me, he looked at the computer and he said, well, we're going to find out when we take it out. God, I was really distressed, almost like my blood was in my toes. But of course, I wanted to lie down to get my blood flowing again, but that would be unmanly. I walked to the nurse's station and lowered my head until the blood came back to my brain. Now, eventually, somebody else did the surgery. It went fine. That surgeon called me in the evening, said that it came back from the lab. Everything is fine. how to change my dressing, and he sounded as if he has all the time in the world to speak with me. Well, you can see, in all likelihood, both surgeons are equally good with a knife, but one of them is better in enhancing well-being than the other. Next. So, financial physician, just like medical physicians, we ask, we truly listen, we empathize. What does your client want? What does your client hurt? You diagnose, you educate, you treat, and over again. I heard a story from an advisor who described a prospect who came and said, before you start planning for my wife and me, you should know that we have a disabled son and we have to make arrangements for him to be taken care of when we are gone. You see, it is not just a matter of the portfolio and so on. There are real human needs, and it's important to listen to that before you draw a pie chart of stocks, bonds, cash, and so on. Next. So again, people are normal. You can, next. People are intelligent, but unlike rational people whose brains are never full, normal people get tired. Sometimes the brain is full. Next. So I'll just illustrate it with two quick cognitive errors. Framing. We use framing shortcuts when we simplify complex problems. We substitute simplified problems for solutions to complex problems, but sometimes we commit framing errors when the solutions are far from the right solutions. Next. So for example, I might say, gee, I sell my stocks because stocks are sure to go down. This framing is like trading is tennis against a practice wall. That's very easy. You shoot the ball, you know where to stand to get it back. But next, trading really is like real tennis with somebody on the other side of the net. And you have to ask yourself, who is the idiot buying my stock? Am I that smart? Now, once you ask yourself, who is the idiot buying my stock? You say, gee, I don't know. There are people with inside information. There are professionals who know how to combine public information. Maybe I'm about to be the idiot, and so I refrain from trading. Next. How do you correct framing errors? Well, here's an example. MBA students were asked to list their objectives for summer internships. Students use the intuitive system 1. You might probably familiar with the notion of an intuitive system 1 and a reflective and scientific system 2. So we use our intuition. They use their intuition to list 7 objectives on average. Next. Next, the teacher assembled all of those objectives of the students into a list of 29. And now that system 2, the reflective system 2, was activated because people could see the entire list. This time, students listed 15 objectives on average, implying that engaging that system 2, framing it in that 29 list, added 8 objectives they considered important, but were not prompted by system 1. Next. Hindsight. In 1997, there was a book that was published that was called The a Bible code, and it had to do with finding patterns in the order of letters in the Bible. Everything is already in the Bible. Next. So for example, on one page, the Hebrew word for economic collapse was accompanied by words depression, stocks, 1929. What did I tell you? The Bible predicted the crash of 1929. Next. But of course, what is obvious in hindsight is not necessarily obvious in foresight. The Bible Code was published in 1997. Did it forecast the boom of 1999? No. The bust of 2000? No. Hindsight and foresight are two different things. Next. So the Bible Code supposedly forecasted in 1997, the murder of Yitzhak Rabin. That happened in 1995. Somebody, kind of just to show how ridiculous it is, looked at the novel Moby Dick and found by the same method that it forecasted the murder of Michael Drosnin, the author of the Bible Code. Of course, that is nonsense. But the point is, hindsight can be dangerous. Next. Well, how do you correct it? One way to correct it is to do something about prospective hindsight. That is, say that an investor is considering concentrating a portfolio in biotechnology. Might be asked, imagine that we are a decade from now. Why did biotechnology stocks yield lower returns than other stocks? This prompts people to think about what could have happened. And this brings to mind events that may not have occurred in that quick system one. Next. Thinking about emotions, here's a question to you. When you encounter a snake, do you move forward towards the snake or to check if it's poisonous, or do you recoil and move back? Well, of course you recoil and move back. Next, because it is, first let me stay away. So we use emotion as a synonym for emotional errors. We say, when you invest, set aside your emotions. Well, one, you cannot set aside your emotions even if you want to. They are in us. Second, emotions are not necessarily emotional errors. There are emotional benefits like feeling pride, and emotional shortcuts help more than emotional errors harm. There's in fact an interplay between cognition and emotion, where emotions do for us good. But we can step away from our emotions and assess them from our cognition. That is, once you stepped away from that snake, you can kind of look at the colors and so on and see if you know about snakes, whether it is poisonous or not. Next. Here's a quick example that was done with fear. So a teacher asked students, undergraduate students, if they would be willing to stand in front of the class the following week and tell a joke. Telling a joke when you are in a classroom can evoke fear. What if you tell a joke and nobody laughs? That's going to be kind of embarrassing. Now, the teacher divided the students who volunteered to tell a joke into two groups. One saw a clip from a horror movie, The Shining. The other one saw some benign picture of a fish swimming in an aquarium or something like that. Now, the point is that more people who saw that horror movie clip chickened out of telling a joke. Why? because that fear that was evoked by that clip of the horror movie really bled into telling a joke that has nothing to do with it logically, but it does affect it. And the same applies in the stock market. Next. So, do you think that the stock market is overvalued now? Do you think that now is a good time to invest in the stock market? In some surveys that I analyzed, I found that people who think that the market is overvalued also think that now is a good time to invest, that there is fear inclines us to expect low returns and high risk. The affect of stocks is negative, and hope inclines us to expect high return with low risk. The effect is positive. We turn to be exuberance. Next. Pride and regret are also emotions. We call them cognitive emotions because unlike fear, where you just recoil from a snake, here you are thinking about how will I feel if I make this choice and it turned out to be the wrong one. So pride and regret are teachers. I think about what will I feel if I now insult a friend or make fun of him. Well, I know that I'll regret it. And so I do not open my mouth and say that. The problem really is that sometimes fear and pride and regret teach the wrong lessons. Next. So, for example, if you invest foolishly, but the stock went up, you say you feel pride and you think that you're a genius and you do it again. You have to be really careful not to have regret and pride mislead you. So I move to the second building block, behavioral portfolio theory. Next. Here's a question to you. If you could increase the chances of having a more comfortable retirement by taking more risk, would you? And you have a choice between be willing to take a little more risk with all your money, be willing to take a lot more risk with some of your money. Now, I don't see you here and I cannot see your hands rise in telling me which you choose, A and B. But from my experience with similar audiences, similar groups of professionals, I know that people go for B. People are willing to take a lot more risk with some of your money. Next. Now, rationally speaking, taking a little more risk with all your money adds to your portfolio risk about the same as taking a lot of risk with some of your money. So why is it that people have such a preference for taking a lot more risk with some of their money? Next. The answer is that we look at portfolios not as a whole, not as a blob, not from the perspective of the stomach. We look at them as the equivalent of being on a plate. So this is dessert on the left, wonderful, appetizing, beautiful. This is the same dessert in a blender from the perspective of the stomach. It makes a difference. Next. So the way I tell it is that I go to a financial advisor. He goes over my goals and he goes over my finances and he says, Meir, I have wonderful news for you. You have a 90% chance to achieve your financial goals. And I go to my wife and I say, I just heard that there's a 10% chance we're going to live in the street. Well, imagine instead that the advisor divided my money into pockets, into mental accounts. One is for the goal of not being poor. The other is for a chance to be rich. Now, I can tell my wife that I've heard that our retirement is going to be secure. We're not going to be poor. We'll be able to fix the roof. We'll be able to buy a new car. And on top of that, we have a 20% chance to leave a good amount of money to our children or charity. It is the same in terms of the utilitarian, but boy, it is really different, much better in terms of well-being when you divide that money. And by the way, I wrote a paper with Harry Markowitz, the father of mean variance portfolio theory, about a mental accounting structure that incorporates that insight that I just talked about, because Harry Markowitz understands normal investors, and he understands that people keep their money in separate pockets and they have different goals. Next. Let me speak briefly about behavioral life cycle theory. Next. So why is it that we save? In standard life cycle theory, people save so that they can spend in retirement, and the optimal amount of saving and spending is such that you spend your last dollar on the last day of your life. But that is not the way normal people think about saving. Savings have utilitarian benefits. Of course, I need money for my time in retirement, but it also has expressive and emotional benefits. Wealth owning rather than spending also yields expressive and emotional benefits. You know, some people want to be the richest man in the cemetery. It provides them a sense of, I am rich. If I give it away now to my children, to charity, I will not be as rich, and I take great pride in being rich, and I take great satisfaction in not spending. Some people really enjoy being misers. Next. So generally, we have conflicts as we go through early life between spending and saving. You know, there are all kinds of temptation, buying a new car, a bigger house, but also knowing that I better save for a house, for example, or for retirement. And what we do really is we use a system with framing and mental accounting and self-control. We have money that we frame as saving, and we move it easily from, say, a salary as one mental account to saving as another. And we have rules, self-control rules that say, move money from salary to savings, but don't move it back. Don't move it into spending. Don't spend your savings until you are retired. Generally, it works. Sometimes people, though, their self-control is getting to be so good, they're so practiced at self-control, that they turn into misers. And they really, even in retirement, they add to their wealth rather than spend and live according to the amount of money they have accumulated. Next. Behavioral asset pricing theory. Next. So, you know, you will ask an economist, why is it that at the Per Se restaurant, which is sort of a fancy restaurant in the US, dinners begin at $295 and lunch at $185 and wine at $295. So you're going to part with a big chunk of money if you go have lunch there. And you see on the right what they give you. So it is kind of like a sandwich, looks like an egg sandwich. There is a smear of wasabi, I think, on the side. Surely you can get the same calories in McDonald's for a fraction of that price. But we are not shocked to find that in that asset pricing model of meals, of restaurant meals, that you have meals that have the same number of calories at, say, $10 and $300, or maybe even more. Next. So if I ask you, what is the asset pricing model of meals? You say, well, it's a function of the wants for utilitarian benefits, such as high nutrition, but also expressive and emotional benefits, such as great prestige, and also cognitive and emotional errors of inferring food quality from its price. So you eat that sandwich at per se, and you say, wow, this is really, really great, even if you have had the same meal at a much less expensive restaurant and it just did not taste as good because your emotions mislead you. Next. So you have the same thing for asset pricing model of stocks. In standard finance, it's all a matter of risk. It's all a matter of the utilitarian benefits, but it is not. It has expressive and emotional benefits. And so, for example, I developed kind of a toy model that has among the factors risk, but also social responsibility. And you can see that this model captures facets of prices that are not captured by the standard, say, 3-factor or 5-factor model of asset pricing, as in standard finance. Next. And last, I will speak about the notions of market efficiency. Now, originally, in Eugene Fama's early work, he defined an efficient market as a market where price of a stock, say, offers a good estimate of the value of that stock. Later on, kind of it was like a bait and switch. It switched to hard to beat market. Look, money managers, mutual fund managers are unable to beat the market, but the two are different. And I'll talk about the cognitive errors that enter here. Next. So think about a bubble. A bubble is a case where the price of, say, a stock or the stock market is much higher than the value. Well, so a bubble cannot exist in a market that is price equals value, but bubbles can persist in a hard to beat market because you don't know when it matters whether we are in a bubble or not. Are we now in a bubble or not? Well, that's kind of hard to tell. We will know in a year how 2023 turned out, but I don't know that now. And so what the evidence indicates is that prices do deviate from value very frequently, even in large amounts, but it is really hard to tell when, and therefore it is hard to beat the market. This is why the standard advice, and I think it's good advice, is don't try to beat the market. Next. So when Bob Shiller and Gene Fama got their Nobel Prize in 2013, they were interviewed. And Shiller said, yes, you can detect bubbles in foresight. He said, you can have a fairly high degree of confidence. That's what I felt in the stock market in the late 1990s. Next. But Fama says, the word bubble drives me nuts, frankly, because I don't think there's anyone in the statistical there's anything in the statistical evidence that says anybody can reliably predict when prices go down. And in fact, he sort of redid the Shiller work and showed, of course, that Shiller said that the market is going to go down, not in 2000, but 4 years before, and the market increased in between. So Shiller was lucky that his book was published, Irrational Exuberance was published in 2000 rather than in 1996. And so, you know, views vary, but I personally stand closer to Fama than to Shiller. It is really hard to tell when the market is too high and too low. I always ask myself, if I'm going to buy or sell, who is the idiot on the other side? And this causes me to just leave my portfolio alone. Next. So let me just conclude by just repeating some of the elements that I talked about here. Next. First, you are well-being advisors. You do a lot of good for your clients by considering all the domains of well-being. Finances, of course, matter, but others matter as well. Next. Again, you are a financial physician. You do promote wealth, but you promote wealth and well-being, and you know that sometimes the way to get more well-being is to spend down wealth, and your job is, of course, a lot more than managing investments. It is really managing investors, and God knows managing investors is more difficult than managing investments. And besides, managing investments is really becoming a commodity, becoming generic. But this kind of notion, the contact with the client, where you really understand, here's this client who has a disabled son, here's that client who has a lot of money but is afraid to spend even though she is in her 90s. These are the things that really bind clients to you. Next. And again, the building blocks of behavioral finance that I will not repeat, that I described very briefly here, and that described, of course, in much greater detail in that book that you can download for free from the CFA Institute. Next. And the title is Behavioral Finance, the Second Generation. Thank you all very much. And I think that I have just a few more minutes to answer whatever questions you have at the moment. And you should always feel free to contact me and ask questions or engage in a conversation, sharing your own experiences. Thanks, Sheila.
Thank you, Maya. That is really interesting. And I think it shows how much you've developed behavioral finance from standard finance to first generation to what is second generation. And as you say, much more based in reality. We have two very interesting questions from Giuseppe Ballocci based on the structure of the industry and the structure of the organizations that financial advisors are working under. Let me start with the industry one. Unlike physicians, in many jurisdictions, financial advisors are not paid for the time they spend with clients. This also implies that people with limited assets have no real access to independent advice. Should we change the way that financial advisors are paid? Will clients accept it?
Well, you know, you are not really paying physicians by the amount of time. You are going to a physician and you get good advice. Now, good advice might mean, no, you should not take another medication. You should say slim down. This might well be good advice, especially if it is accompanied by instruction on how you can do that. It also means sometimes, what you thought of as being cancer is just some fat under the skin. There's nothing much to worry about. Now, financial advisors, the problem that you face, and I empathize with that, is that people still think of financial advisors as people who beat the market. But that is not your main benefit. The benefit of a physician is not in giving you many pills. Instead of being paid by transaction, as used to be, now it is by asset under management, which is a lot better, getting some proportion, 1% or so, for the work that you do. But really, this is something where advisors themselves have to work to change the organizational structure such that it leads them to maximize the well-being of their clients, rather than pretend that advising clients, that is kind of a free benefit, and the real work is beating the market. I know that that is hard. I know that is hard. That is, I get paid as a teacher, not directly by my students, but by the university. Of course, I work very hard to be a good teacher, but I know that if I have a disgruntled student in my class of 30, well, those things happen. I try to do better next time, but I still get my regular salary. It is not the same in your world of advising. And all I can say is that advisors really have to mobilize to explain to the big people in the organization and explain to clients what they actually do and how they benefit. And it is especially important now when you have the world of robo-advisors that provide the same pie chart you provide. It is really important to realize that your real benefit and the real way you bind clients is by being their well-being advisor.
Yes, that's. I think you've answered Giuseppe's second question too. Is what about behavioral finance characteristics that do not stem from personal psychology, but organizational structure, management of career risk by financial professionals?
So things are changing. Just think about the move from suitability to fiduciary. It used to be that financial advisors, brokers just had to kind of check that the recommendation is not outrageous, that you're not letting somebody living on a small pension in his 80s play options. But we have moved closer to well-being advisors in the fiduciary rules that says you have to put the client's interest first. And I see well-being advisor as one step above fiduciary, which is not just that is in the interest, typically financial interest of clients, but also their well-being interests, which means, for example, that if a client comes and says, I'm socially responsible, I really care about the environment, I don't want these particular stocks in the portfolio, that instead of dismissing it and saying, oh, I'm here to maximize your wealth and then you can do with your money what you wish, you engage that prospect or client in a conversation, you find out a way to add to their wealth, or at least not to diminish it, while letting them have the well-being benefits of being true to their values. Because if you immediately say, forget that, the client hears, this advisor doesn't really listen to me, doesn't really care about me, he just has this canned solution and he's going to shove it down my throat. That is not a good recipe for keeping a client and for helping a client. And you know how satisfying it is when you truly can help a client. I know that from teaching, it really feels good when I know that I have gotten the point across to my students, and now they understand what they didn't before, and now they have overturned some thinking that they had before.
Thanks. Here's from Tanya Wirtz. As you so elegantly put, we should manage the investors. Would you say it is advisable to point clients towards their biases, or rather just work around the biases, meaning take them into account without making the client part of the, and their biases part of the conversation?
No, I think you are a teacher. In this sense, you are very much like me. And you can describe, say, framing errors, and you can admit that it is not something that you knew all along, that this is something that you learn, that is financial advisors, under their vest of knowledge, they are the same as the clients. The advantage you have over them, the benefit you provide to them is the benefit of your knowledge. And so tell them it is normal to think about trading as playing tennis against a practice ball. But have you asked yourself, who is the idiot on the other side of the trade? So if a client comes in a panic, the stock market went down, I want to sell all my stocks and so on, you can ask that client to pause and say, first, I know what you're talking about because my intuition is like yours. The advantage I have that I am providing to you is the knowledge of moving from system 1 to system 2. And knowing those, I kind of now automatically think about hindsight. I automatically think about who is the idiot on the other side. I am not any smarter than you or your clients. People can learn. People are intelligent. They can learn. Sometimes they forget. Sometimes they are gripped by fear. This really is where you are coming in managing investors.
That raises an interesting question, because whenever I hear these things, I think you really have to listen with two ears. One is you look at the client and their biases, but you also have to look at yourself as a client advisor and the biases the client advisor brings to the conversation, and both things have to be managed. That becomes very complicated. What recommendations would you make?
I say to advisors, you have to educate yourself. Investment, the term investment comes from the word vest, so we wear a vest of knowledge. That really is what makes us distinct from our clients. I have a vest of knowledge in finance, in behavioral finance, in economics. This is a part of knowledge, way of thinking that I have acquired over the years, and now I convey it to my students. I educate them, and so you have to be aware. For example, that you gave a piece of advice to get into this particular stock or to get out, and it turned out to be the right thing in hindsight, and you say, gee, I'm a genius, let me give another piece of similar advice. Bad idea, and you don't have to be a genius to figure it out, that sometimes there are things like driving. You turn the wheel to the left, the car goes to the left every time. But when it comes to investment, there's so much luck, there's so much randomness that a lot of the time you make what can be described as a very smart choice, but just by luck, it turned out to be the wrong one in terms of the outcome. But you don't just switch. You think about it. You think about it as a scientist, as I do, and you evaluate the evidence and you guide investors. It is hard. It is really hard to be an advisor. It is even hard to be a teacher. When I tell my students that I will not teach them how to beat the market, I can see the disappointment in their face. But later on, they get the point. At least most of them get the point. And that is what you can hope for. You can hope for satisfying almost all, trying to satisfy everyone, but knowing that sometimes you will just fail. There are people who just like to trade, you know, they like to trade it in the same way that people like to play video games. Send them to another advisor. You know, you don't really want to blight your life dealing with these kinds of clients.